Welcome to the Jewish Education Experience podcast with your hosts, Yasmina and Ari, who will be uncovering gems of wisdom with Jewish educators from around the world.
To our audience, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, and we appreciate you sharing our podcast with others also. Please consider supporting our podcast financially by contributing via Zelle, jewisheducationpodcast@gmail.com, or by joining our Patreon community, www.patreon.com/Jewish Education Experience Podcast. And to all of you Jewish educators and students of Jewish education around the world, chizchu ve'imtzu. May you be strengthened and encouraged in your holy endeavors.
Our guest today is Avigayle Adler Katz, and she is the founder and director of the Open Studio in Jerusalem. She's been teaching art and creativity since she was in high school. She has a Master of Arts in Jewish Education from Hebrew University and is a graduate of the Pardes Educators Program. Avigayle made Aliyah to Israel from Denver, Colorado 9 years ago and has been running the Open Studio ever since. She has been an artist in residence at several summer camps, seminary programs, and museums throughout the United States and Israel. Avigayle has been awarded the distinction of Oman Mitzdayen, or Outstanding Artist, by the Israeli Ministry of Absorption, and highlighted in Celebrating 70 Extraordinary Women of Israel in the Times of Israel. Avigayle specializes in mosaics, glass painting, and paper cutting, but her true talents lie in helping to bring out the inner artist in each child and adult she works with. She also got married about a year and a half ago, and she loves her husband and 3 children in Jerusalem. You just had a baby, didn't you, Avigayle?
Yes, I did.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
Daniel Yosef just turned 7 months old.
Wow.
7 months and 1 week old.
That's so sweet.
And so is he an artist?
Well, actually, it's funny you asked that because I'm not an artist. I only realized this on Friday. David and I were talking, my husband, and he told me that I'm actually not an artist. I'm an artisan. So, no, apparently we are not artists. We are artisans.
We're
Artisan.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to this one because we were actually, before you came on, we were looking at your website, which is openstudiojerusalem.com. It's spelled openstudioJLEM.com. And so the listeners can go there and really see what you're all about and all the things you've done with this. So welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So we read the bio, but will you please just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you began your journey in education?
Okay, yes. So it actually goes back quite a ways. The first time I consciously, I guess it's funny because I was sent a home video of myself a couple years ago by my little sister, and I was 5 and she was 3. And, it's one of these things she recorded on her phone off of the TV. I guess my father was playing it for her. And I didn't realize, but I'm like teaching her how to do a flip on the monkey bars or how to like flip over her shoulder. And I sound like I'm such a teacher. Like even at 5 years old, I had that like teacher voice. I'm like, oh, that's very good. Good job, So I didn't realize that I was a teacher when I was 5 years old. But my first time I consciously decided that I wanted to be involved in education, I was 12, and it was the summer. It was about to turn 13. It was the summer between 8th and 9th grade, and I was in a Jewish day camp program, and I was a counselor in training, a CIT in a Jewish JCC day camp in Medford, New Jersey.
Oh, Medford.
And, you're from Philly, right?
I am.
Is that
from
right?
South Jersey.
Yeah, so grew up in South. So from in Medford, New Jersey, JCC. And there was a program for counselors in training where, 1 day a week they took us on a trip, and the rest of the days we basically worked, as like aides or helpers in the camp. And I was going through a difficult childhood. I had divorced parents. It was like my mom wasn't in the picture. It was a very, very difficult time. And I was like your typical angry, 13-year-old, 12-year-old, whatever. And just felt like I didn't have any friends. I just was very much a loner. And I remember we were at Dorney Park in Wildwater Kingdom, and we're going on this interview. remember they had these like lazy river rafts where you were in like a tube and you would go through these like water, there was a waterfall and a fountain and whatever, and and everybody would go in these groups with their friends and they'd all like hang on and make a chain. And I had nobody I was going with. I was just kind of in my own little angry, moody teenage self. And this guy who happened to be the director of the counselor training program, kind of floats up next to me in his tube, and he grabbed my tube, and I look up and I'm like, what? And he's looking at me and he says, you don't know this, but I get you.
Wow.
And he's just holding my tube and he's looking at me, and I'm like, whatever, like just leave me alone, like, and I don't know, I kind of like, and he just kind of held onto my tube for about 2 minutes or 3 minutes in silence, and we just sort of like went around down this like lazy river together, and at some point he let go of my tube and he let me go, and I started to think about, well, who does he think he is that he gets me? Of course he doesn't get me, and like, nobody knows all my problems in life and whatever, and I don't know, but then I started to think, I remember on the bus ride home, sitting in the back, like looking at him in the front seat, and he was like this great, he was super cool, he was this counselor that everybody liked, and all the girls had a crush on, and I'm thinking, like, first of all, okay, of course he doesn't get me, right? But like the fact that he even wants to get me, or that he even thinks I'm worth the getting, and it made me start to ask these questions, like, what am I to get? Like, what is there about me to get? What's worthwhile? And I had no self-esteem. I was like not in a good place at all.
Wow.
And I remember at that moment thinking, like, maybe he doesn't get me, but I want to be that guy. I want to be, his name is Aaron Greenberg, and I've actually told him the story since. We've reconnected as adults, and he was an adult then, and he's actually brought me into group. He runs all kinds of Jewish educational camp programs, and he's brought staff to Israel, camp directors of JCC camps, and he's had me come to the hotel and like tell that story to his to his staff. And I said, I wanted to go into education because I wanted to be the person that says to that kid that's lonely, that doesn't have any friends, like, I want to be the person that says, I get you, and to give them a chance to feel like they're worth getting.
Wow. Okay, so I have to ask you, since you
that
said
was it.
you said you were working at the camps in Medford. What years? If you remember.
So I'm 42.
Okay.
And I was working in BBYO in high school. And so basically once I was off, like basically all of high school, I was there. But this was, let me think, 1990 maybe?
Wow.
90. No, it was later. It was like 92, 93.
Okay. All right.
Something
So
like
I worked there later. So I was wondering if we had any overlap.
Oh my gosh. So who did you work for?
Oh my gosh, I don't even remember the names, but I was in the summer camp with the very little kids, the 3-4-year-olds.
Hilltop. The
Yes,
Hilltoppers, unless they changed it.
That's it. So as soon as
I was working in Camp Aaron, I was the art specialist with the older kids.
That's so funny. Wow.
That was,
What a small world. Because as soon as you said camps at Medford, Aaron Greenberg, I was like, oh my gosh. Wow.
That's it. So then he was the director of the camp years later, and
That's right. So he was the director already then when I started there. Gosh, when did I start there?
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, so I'm curious to know, Avigayle, if you would you consider him to be an educator, or the question is, are there any educators that you particularly admire? But I'm curious to know specifically if he would fit that bill for you.
I think that to me is the ultimate educator, somebody that causes somebody else to look inside of themselves and say, who am I? And I'm worth getting.
Wow.
Because if you don't have that, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what you're teaching. And I've had many incarnations of my career. I've been an art teacher, I've been an English teacher, I've been a Hebrew teacher, I've been a Judaic studies scholar in residence. I mean, and a day school teacher. If you don't have that, that love and that place, I forget the exact pasuk, but it says in the, I think it's in the Gemara, it says, there's no you can't learn in a place, like something exact, I'm not great at memory, but basically the learning can only take place in a situation where your heart is jumping, where you're alive, where you're at peace and you're in love. And, like you have to really enjoy the learning, no matter what it is, or forget it. There's just no point.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a gem right there, because like I always think of educators as teachers and, people with a lot more experience. I mean, but it sounds like even camp counselors certainly can fall within the realm of educator.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So how do you typically incorporate God with some of the groups that you work with?
So it's very interesting because since I've made Aliyah and been in Israel, I started this business, kind of like a community, really, called the Open Studio. And I guess it's entrepreneur, but it's really social entrepreneurship, where basically I consider my job is getting kids to believe in themselves through realizing that they can make stuff, and connecting to Judaism, to Jerusalem, to fellow kids in their neighborhood or community, but also to Jewish artists, to history, to, it's a very broad, in Israel, it's great. We don't have to worry about separation of church and state, it's like, it's all there. Everything's mixed in. So I can do a camp where for 1 week we learn about archaeology of Jerusalem, and we're going to these archaeological sites. We'll go to the Temple Mount excavations, and then the next day the kids are sitting there brainstorming, creating their own secret society and creating artifacts, and learning about what is an artifact and how do you, what's represented and then they become like, the kids create the society and they make their own mosaics and their own all kinds of basically artifacts of that society, and then they switch. They're in two different groups, and then one group becomes the archaeologists and they dig up the other group's society, and they have to put together the clues of what that society meant. And so they're creative, they're making their own stuff, but they're also having an appreciation for the larger picture of Israel, Jerusalem, archaeology. It's just one example, but there's basically, for me, God, and this is kind of a roundabout answer, is that, I always wondered about what does it mean that, we were created b'tselem Elokim, right? If people are created b'tselem Elokim, then what does that mean? That everybody has this thing in them, this spark of God, whatever that means, that is the same thing, but at the same time, every person is different than every other person in the world. So what is it how can it be, right? It's a contradiction. Either we have something that we share or we're totally different.
Right.
And I think, for me, that Tselem Elokim is the ability to create. What makes us like God? Well, God created, and we also have the potential to create. So what I create, right, my Tselem Elokim is different than everyone else's, is different than Ari's and Yasmin and everyone else in the world, because what you can create with your life history, with your art, with your thoughts, with your feelings, with your relationships in the world is going to be very different than what I create with my life experience. So, as far as, to me, it's almost like I feel like whenever I'm making something, and I say to the kids I work with, that's your spark of Hashem, that's your Tselem Elokim. And, even when they work on something and they work really hard on something and they come to my studio and they make a painting and, or a mosaic or something. And I say, no one in the world could make that the way you made it. This is like mamash, one of a kind thing, right? There's no one in the world who would paint that design exactly the way you did. And even tomorrow, if you came back and you tried to paint the same exact thing, you couldn't.
Right.
And so that to me is that godliness, that it's like it's there and it's there for the moment and you can tap into it anytime, but it's always changing and evolving.
Wow. That is so
great. Fascinating. So I'm curious though, how you went from being a camp counselor, and then I understand you said you've taught in various schools and different things. How did you kind of go from that to opening up the Open Studio in Jerusalem and getting that started?
So it's a great question. When I was after college, I volunteered in a program which doesn't exist anymore. It was called Project Otzma. And it was basically like the Peace Corps, but in Israel for a year after college. And I was there. I was at Hebrew University my junior year in Jerusalem, study abroad, and then basically went back, finished college. And as I was in college, I majored in anthropology. And throughout my college career, I guess you could say, I became observant. I became Orthodox from not being observant, not being Shomer Shabbat or things like that beforehand. I grew up conservative, but I always wanted to do things, not just learn about them. And so I went to Hillel in college, and basically when you're studying anthropology, you learn about anthropologists that basically, follow these very interesting, tribes and all kinds of out there people all over the world, and you're sitting in their religious ceremonies and you're eating their food, and I was like, okay, well, I'm Shomer Shabbat now. I keep kosher. I can't go into their churches, and I can't eat their food, and so like there wasn't much left. So I'll go to Israel and figure out what to do with my life. So I spent the time. I volunteered in Israel, and I lived in Netivot, and part of the time I was there, we were at Pardes Institute in Jerusalem for a 3-week just a learning, just in between. It was different tracks. The year was divided up, and there was a 3-week learning track, which I loved and connected to, and decided to do the educators program. That was a program back then where it was a master's degree in Jewish education.
Wow.
At Hebrew University, and you also got to study at Pardes Institute in Jerusalem, which is basically a co-ed, non-denominational, but pretty much modern Orthodox yeshiva program, seminary program for college graduates. And it was the first time I ever got to really study text in a serious way, really ever, because I grew up with Hebrew school and that kind of thing, and I was always curious. So anyway, I got a master's in Jewish education. I'll fast forward the story. It's long, but basically got a master's in Jewish education. And then I had a obligation to teach in a Jewish day school in North America for 3 years. So then I moved to New York, and I taught at a school called Beit Rabban, which is a small school on the Upper West Side.
Wow.
And that's actually where a lot of my educational philosophy and vision sort of, I was able to hone it in and to really to sharpen it for myself, which was basically this idea of child-centered education that like you had asked before, an educator, you don't really need to be, you can, there's a model being, what they call a sage on a stage.
Right.
You're basically a performer and you're the hero, and you're giving over, like the Rebbe, right? You're giving over this amazing inspirational story or whatever. And the little kids are sitting there wide-eyed and you're their hero. And the other is basically where you're basically just holding up a mirror to them, and you're a facilitator. And, the teacher is sitting almost like the children are sitting in a circle facing each other, and the teacher is outside the circle behind them taking notes of what they say and kind of repeating and reflecting back to them, but really facilitating, creating educational opportunities that follow and respond to what their own curiosity is. And so that's really where I took the idea several years later, when I made Aliyah. I didn't want to be a Jewish studies teacher, even though that was really my background. I mean, I only kind of fell into it because I wanted to learn Torah for free, and that was the way to do it, was to do this program. And so then I had this, when I said to move to Israel, my Hebrew wasn't great. I'm like, I'm not going to sell ice to the Eskimos. There's plenty of people in Israel who can teach much better Jewish studies than me with better Hebrew. But what I can do is I can help them figure out who they are. And I can, and I had all these art supplies, and it just actually so happened when I really didn't have a plan when I made Aliyah. But I had all these art supplies because I'd always been creative, and I used art as a way of teaching text, as a way of teaching anything really. I'm very tactile. And so my friends, I was sitting Shabbat, it was a Shabbat dinner, and I was talking about, my friends were asking, people I'd known from when I was in Israel before, what I was going to do, now that I'm in Israel and I'm an Ola Chadasha, a new immigrant. And I said, well, I have all these art supplies, I just want to, I don't know yet, and my friend's kid, who was about 11 or 12 at the time said, oh, can we come after school and can we do a chug? Can we come after school and start and use your supplies? Like, what do you have? Your paper, paints, you know, all kinds of cool stuff from America. And I said, sure. So it started with this young woman, Yarden singer, who is now in the army. If she's not almost out of the army, actually, it's been a while. And so she started bringing her friends after school, and it started with 2 people, and then 4 people, and then 6 people, you know, once a week, and they would come and they would use my art supplies. And so it turned into, you know, first I taught them what I was good at, what I knew, and then I kind of ran out of stuff that I was good at. So I started to learn new things. You know, I went to Spain on a ski trip. I went to Andorra, and I stopped in Spain for an extra 24 hours, and I took a workshop on mosaic. And so then I started to do mosaic and teach mosaic. And, you know, now with Google, you can pretty much learn anything. And I just, every time I learned something new, I brought that back. And I started, you know, working with my students. And that's how the Open Studio sort of came about.
I love that. That is so fascinating. Just
evolved.
Your story and how it evolved, and look at what you're doing. That's amazing. Wow. And I'm sure the kids love it.
Yeah, since, you know, it's grown. I mean, I've been called back. I was actually sent as a ambassador for Avigayle Adler, which is the Ministry of the Diaspora in Israel. Has an organization that it I guess funded called Otz Avigayle Adler, and they actually brought delegations of Israeli. They would have partner communities for small and medium sized Jewish communities all around the world. They had kind of like pods, I guess, of like 5 or 6 communities. And they bring a Jewish educator who's the same 5 times a year. And each time he or she comes with a different artist. And the artist does whatever kind of art or experiential project. Sometimes it's a musician. Once it was a farmer. Once it was a visual artist. There's different types of people who have come. And I was actually brought on 2 delegations of theirs, one to Scandinavia, which was amazing. I got to do all kinds of pre-Pesach creative activities with the whole community, from kids in day school, preschool kids, adults. And so it's been really cool being able to combine, like getting to know the Israeli educational and art scene and bringing it out as an artist in residence to different places, and, you know, really helping others get their hands dirty with projects. Wow.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. Well, you mentioned, you know, just working in Israel, and at first you were doing things that you were good at, and then you realized you were kind of stuck, and then how you evolved and changed. And very curious what you have found to be, I guess, your biggest challenge as an educator, and I guess evolving yourself.
So my biggest challenge was Corona. That's hands down. I mean, that has been, you know, I definitely been growing and evolving. But this year really was just a whole different I mean, for the whole world, right? It was just I think the first thing was, I know that I do really well when I can teach a room of, let's say, up to 10 people. Or even if I have a microphone and I can be in a room of 70 people and do this really exciting project, and we're all building this massive, you know, model of map of Israel with all these materials, and it's this huge floor, you know, takes up the size of a gym. But when I had to sort of figure out how when I got big enough that I needed to figure out how to not multiply myself, but to kind of create programs that others can use, and training the staff and reproducing those programs, that was much more difficult than, you know, when I'm in a situation and I'm with kids, I get so excited, I'm so animated, and it's not something you can easily reproduce, you know. That's true. It's not like so anyway, there were challenges, but I worked on that, and we have a great program. But with Corona this year, it's been, you know, we usually have in our summer 70 kids that come, and most of them, about 80 to 90% of them, are Americans, or, you know, tourists that come to Israel for the summer. Actually, I would say in the first part of the summer, it's about 80%, and then in the second part, it's about 70. but it's a lot. And it really, of course, there was no tourism this summer, so it really affected the open studio a lot. And instead of having 70 kids a week in camp, we didn't even know if we would be allowed to have camp. And then we had camp, but we had it for 2 days, and then camp was canceled. And then the next week we were allowed to have it again. And it was, it made planning an absolute nightmare. And of course, but instead of having 70 kids a week, we had between like 8 and 10 kids a week in different pods. And so what we did was we went virtual. We tried to basically I made these kits where I had to plan overnight what was happening the next week of camp. And we had what was called camp in a box. So for people that were high risk or people that wanted to follow along, that, their parent, they lived in, a different part. They were in bidud, which is isolation. So I would go Saturday night after Shabbat and I would deliver this box of everything they needed to join us for camp. And I'd be like delivering to Modi'in and Beit Shemesh and whatever at 1 a.m. on Saturday night.
Oh my goodness.
And camp was Sunday morning. And so Sunday morning, we sat there and we were on Zoom, and I had my 8, 9, whatever kids with masks on, and everybody was around a computer. There was a computer in the front of the room where I had a couple kids on Zoom. And we would sit there and unpack their box. And this was, this was the project or the 2 projects of the day or whatever. And we would sit there and we would do them. That wasn't the challenge. The challenge was I love to be able to be very spontaneous and adapt on my feet. If I see a project isn't working or somebody doesn't connect, then I can kind of step back and I can help them. I can teach the background. I can tell a story, and you can't just change projects on one foot like that when you've got the supplies already pre-delivered and pre-measured and stuff like that. So, it wasn't ideal, but I think that people were very appreciative that we did what we could do. It's hard though, because, what I really missed this summer was it wasn't fun in the same way because we didn't have that one-on-one interaction. I couldn't hug the kids. I couldn't see them behind their masks. It was very hard to really read them and to feel like, that emotional connection that you can see when you see when you see a child, hold up something they're so proud of, and their eyes get so big and this huge smile that they, I made this in my summer in Israel or whatever it is, that it took a lot out of it. There was definitely a fear. Oh, I want to hug you, but I can't. So let's bump elbows.
Yeah, it's different.
So you think it's gonna be a problem, the kids wearing masks for long periods of time like this?
Since then I've been teaching. Now I teach in a school. I teach English also during the year now, which is a very good thing because since Corona, I haven't been able to have kids in my studio and to be teaching them. Art lessons is not unfortunately not considered by Israel a vital business.
Yeah.
So we haven't been allowed to be open, but I have been doing a lot of kits, and I've been creating kits, and I started Pesach last year really in 2 days and I was also 7 months pregnant at the time.
Wow.
Went into early labor. Actually, my water broke and I went into labor at 34 weeks, right in the middle of the first lockdown. So I basically, we made these Pesach kits, me and my partner Rivka, and we sold 200 kits of all these art projects that we had planned for our Pesach Kaitana, which is a camp, because the kids in Israel don't have school the week before Passover.
Right.
So we usually do these day camps, and we had all these supplies, we had everything, and we said, okay, well, we don't know what's going to be. Let's package it up into a kit. And so we videotaped me, and I'm sitting there putting me these these Seder plate pillows, and it was 5 or 6 different art projects in this kit. And so we were getting them out, selling them, getting them, and people loved it, and they were so happy that there was something for their kids to do because nobody knew what was going to happen. It was the first lockdown. There was no school. Parents were, the stores were closing. Everything was, and just the appreciation that people, they would send me pictures of the projects that their kids made, and it was amazing because there were kids all over the country doing the same project, and I was getting pictures and all different, but it's not a project that everything comes out always the same. It's about, here's the raw materials, here's the inspiration, here's some ideas, and have at it and send us what you come up with. So I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing. And I just have to throw this out there that it's amazing that you were able to do all that being 7 months pregnant, because I'm 7 months pregnant and I just want to sleep. So,
No, it's so funny because I think it was the stress. My water broke. It was like right after Pesach. My water broke the Sunday after Pesach, and I basically had the baby. Like, I mean, I was 4 days in the hospital on maternity, what is it, Shmirat Harayon, where they try and keep you from having the baby. And, but thank God I had it early. He was little. He was on a respirator for a couple hours, but thank God he's totally fine now. He's 7 months. He's nice and chubby, and he's beautiful. And thank God, he was like our. I mean, a lot of things in my life were sort of happening at once because I was planning how I was going to go into summer on maternity leave, and try and remove myself a bit from the camp scene while having the business run itself, basically, and hiring the staff. And then Pitam, it didn't really matter because there wasn't much of a summer anyway,
Exactly.
Well, so, I mean, we just want to say we were looking at your website and the different kits and stuff, and we just think the kits are totally genius. Obviously now, like, it's, more, but I think even after, once we're post the pandemic, I think the kits are still going to be a great idea, and that, parents can use them and other educators can use them. And so it seems like also because you have such a lofty sort of understanding of education that you don't have a problem staying motivated. But do you ever feel it's hard to stay motivated as an educator, or what keeps you going?
Eyeballs. Eyeballs. I have a friend, a very good friend, when I was living in Denver, Colorado, before I made Aliyah, and I was working in a Jewish day school in Colorado in Boulder that decided to close, and that was really the impetus for me making Aliyah. And I remember telling him over the phone how sad it was that I don't have any eyeballs. Like, what do I mean by eyeballs? Is like those wide eyes of kids staring back at you, just waiting for you to show them whatever you can show them about the world, and just wanting to be there and open. And I actually got a job babysitting for this family, just stam, while I was waiting to make Aliyah. And I sent him a picture, and it was, I think, 6 kids, and they were all sitting on a bench. They were all siblings. They were sitting on a bench, and we were in a park. And I sent him a picture, and he wrote back, eyeballs. Like, you got your eyeballs back. What is, like, you don't have your classroom, but you have, so I guess if you don't have the eyeballs, it's very hard to stay motivated. And it's hard when you're doing things virtual, because I'm making these kids and I'm putting them out there, and I don't always see what, if it, do I know, is it too hard for them? Is it too easy? Is it boring? Is it challenging? And I don't get that last minute, right where they take their project home, that recognition where they're proud of themselves and they show their parents. In my studio, we always have, and this has always been something that I've used as a guiding principle in education. I always have 2 rules in my classroom, and only 2 rules. One is you have to be safe. Mm-hmm. And I always sit with the kids, adults, what does that mean? Does that mean no running with scissors? Well, yeah, but does that also mean, like, you can't hurt anybody's feelings, right? So everybody has to be emotionally and physically safe. And the second is you can't ask, is this good, or am I done? And, I always talk about it with them. I say, well, why can't you? Why can't you say, is this good? Why can't you say, because I don't want my students to be dependent on me for that external validation.
Right.
If you can't look at something that you did and say, this is good, then you're probably just not done, or you didn't try as hard as you could, and that, so try a little harder. So, and it's the same thing with, am I done? Well, I don't know, are you done? And I say to the kids, if you have to even ask that question, then you know the answer. Mm-hmm. So
I think those are good skills to teach kids, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Avigayle, do you also work with other educators there? And regardless of yes or no, what advice would you give to new educators who are just beginning their journey?
So yes, I work with a lot of not just here in Israel, but all over the world. I've gone and done when I do artists in residence, I also do like coaching for teachers, how to bring in experiential, how to bring experiences in with teaching. I teach, a lot of times I end up teaching art teachers how to bring in more Jewish content, and I teach the Judaic studies teachers how to bring in more art. For some reason, those departments aren't always so connected in schools, and so it's really how to just be more holistic. I do a lot of collaboration. Anytime I see, even when I went, my husband and I went after we got married to Romania. And, my first thing was, I got to find an artisan, right? I have to find somebody who makes stuff in Romania. And we went to this little village, and lo and behold, we found this guy who does sculpture and painting. And I mean, everywhere I go, I'm always trying to meet and to learn from whoever the local expert in whatever is, and bring it back to my students. But also here in Israel, I feel like my mission, or one of my missions, is really to connect kids to creative people that are in their own neighborhood. So a lot of artists know me, and I bring kids into their studio, and the kids come and they sit and they see and they look, and they love asking, they always ask the best questions. So yeah, there's a lot of collaboration between other camps, between calligraphers, between ceramic artists, between textile artists, a lot of fabric, a lot of sewing. Anything I'm not very good at, I always like to bring in other people to do, because I just like to connect people. And advice for somebody getting started in education, I think it's to not get too caught up. First of all, to not try and be someone you're not. Right. Don't worry about being the smartest, the most scholarly, there will always be somebody who knows more than you.
It's true.
But there won't always be someone who can listen to a child the way you can.
Right.
And who can hear them, and who can sit with them and be present with them. And you never know what you say, what you do, there have been 3 times specifically in my career that I can say that I have actually saved someone's life.
Wow.
Because I happened to be in a time and a place for whatever reason, and I think Hashem put me there in a moment where really nobody was hearing that person. And I just happened to be able, because of my experience, because of whatever, because I missed the bus that day, that I had extra time to sit and listen to that person. And I was able to realize that this one had an eating disorder, or this one was cutting herself, or this one was pregnant, things that and honestly, these things happen mostly in informal Jewish educational settings. I feel like a lot more than formal. And just to be aware, have your eyes and ears open, and to be present, and don't try and be someone you're not, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
Definitely.
It's okay. I can be with you in the not knowing.
Huh.
And let's figure it out together. Let's explore together. Let's learn about what we can make together.
I love that you say that, and it's important for us as educators to realize the lives that we touch, and how even just one little thing that you can say, or even just listening to our students, our children, you just never know how it can change them.
Yeah, and is there anything that you do to build like a Torah foundation for them, or do you direct them based on what they're saying in that direction, depending on the conversation, or how do you do that?
I think it really depends on who they are. This may be a little bit going backwards, but there's something that you mentioned earlier about the kids and how the kids could really, help. Is I have a friend, a lot of friends, growing up in Southern New Jersey, but one friend in particular on Facebook that people I've been reconnecting to over the years, that, I chose to take a path where I became religiously observant, but I did not come from that. And most of my friends and colleagues growing up and in that, my early career didn't. And a lot of them intermarried. I have siblings that are intermarried, and a lot of them don't really know where, they have kids that are Jewish or half Jewish or whatever, and their kids are asking, and their kids are curious, but they're not really sure how to teach them, what to teach them. And, it has to be a custom message for the person. I can't tell I'm not I'm not going to go teach everybody how to light Shabbos candles because it's not relevant for most of the people that I'm teaching, and when it's Jerusalem and it's one thing, but if I'm teaching in southern New Jersey and in a Reformed synagogue, they're not going to, or even mixed families, So if they want to know what a holiday is about, you have to think about where they are and meeting them in a non-judgmental way, So it's never about, oh, this is how you do it or this is what I do. It's more like, well, what do you think? Like you asked about God before. How do I connect to God? So when I was teaching at Beit Rabban, we were told, this is the job interview question was, what do you do if a kid says to you, what does God look like?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the right answer? What do you think?
I would say, what do you think?
Exactly. You got it. I totally failed that in my interview. I was like, right. But exactly. It's well, what do you think?
Right.
I mean, what do you think God is like? What do you think? Do you think God, and so it's really, because even if we knew.
I'm sure you get some pretty good answers with that too from the kids, don't you?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because they say to me, or just all kinds of questions, they say, it's like, what do you think? Or does God exist? Or does, and the thing is really big part of education is to hold myself back.
Right.
And, you have to kind of really hold your ego back. She doesn't want to know what you think about God. She wants to know what she thinks about God.
Exactly.
And she just wants to know that you're going to listen to her.
Definitely. It's so true. Well, tying into that, as we move forward, what do you think that successful Jewish education will look like in the future? I know it's a tough question.
This is a very controversial topic. I think it will look very different. I think certainly with Corona, it's shown us that there are, so many other ways to go. I mean, I grew up in the secular, it was a conservative Hebrew school, parents schlepping me twice a week to Hebrew school. And I was the kid that actually liked it, but nobody else did. And, it was like, oh man, can't we go to soccer like our friends? Why do we have to go to sit and learn Jewish stuff after school at 4 p.m. on a Wednesday? I mean, who really, right? And 4 hours on a Sunday. And it doesn't work. And I've been on both sides. I've been in the administration. I've been teaching. I taught through high school and college in Hebrew schools in America, and even like as an adult. I think it definitely has to be very experiential, very messy, hands-on. It has to involve Israel, and it has to involve the global Jewish community. Whether that means, I have this vision of doing a online global Hebrew school, not where we're all online and sitting on Zoom, because I feel like the world will never want to be on Zoom again after this is over. I know as a teacher,
Zoomed out.
I am so done with Zooms. In Hebrew, there's a new word apparently in Hebrew, zimzamti. I've done my Zoom and it's over.
It's over.
I have no interest in it anymore. But basically, this idea that we can have kids in Helsinki and in Pittsburgh and in St. Louis, Louisiana, and in Jerusalem and in whatever we and a little town in France, all making a project having to do with, let's say, this idea of the Seder plate, like this pillow where the little kids can fall asleep on this pillow and it has all the things on the Seder plate. And it's this, and there's an online, gallery where kids are connecting to each other and kids and adults and families, but doing things together, where there's this sense of this global Judaism. And I don't think it's going to have to do with, who eats what and what's in halacha necessarily. And, I think that we need to focus on what unites us and not what divides us. We saw this year the first time, I think, in the world that Jews all of a sudden on Yom Kippur were davening without a mechitza on the middle of the street, and all of a sudden nobody cared if you daven Nusach Shvard or Ashkenaz or, it was just like, let's just do this because this is what Jews do.
That's powerful.
And cut out the stuff. And I think I think it's a really uniting thing. And it can be used, I think there needs to be hands-on, and there needs to be a love and a joy. the Judaism that I grew up with, I'm 42, so I don't know if it's still around, but that Judaism that, my parents' parents survived the Holocaust and therefore you have to suffer through Hebrew school. It doesn't work anymore, All right, like we hated it, so you have to hate it. That guilt does not last more than a generation. And I look at my siblings and they pulled away from it, and I only embraced Judaism because I found things I loved about it, and I was in B'nai B'rith, and I went to camp, and it was very beautiful for me.
Wow.
So fascinating too, because I remember I had classmates, and I also went to Hebrew school and grew up conservative. And I had classmates that, the last thing they wanted to do was be in Hebrew school, and their parents forced them to come. And I always enjoyed going and learning. And
you see, we're the nerds who end up doing these podcasts, right?
Yeah, see? I guess it's just one of those things that,
but they're now sending their kids to us for inspiration. Yeah. Go figure that one out.
There you go. It comes full circle.
This is definitely very exciting times for Jewish education. And Avigayle, you're a true educator and artisan. And
thank you.
Such an honor to have you on the podcast. I guess we'll just ask if there's anything else you want to add before we go.
I definitely would love, if anybody has any questions, you can put my email, my Facebook. I would be very happy to mentor, to consult, to I have a lot of ideas, and I couldn't possibly live long enough to see them all happen. So I love when somebody else takes my idea and runs with it. So I'm happy to give out ideas and advice.
So. The creativity is contagious for sure. I feel like I want to go and create something right now.
Yeah, well, you check out my kids. We can do something together. I'll meet you on Zoom.
Yes.
We love so much. And
Okay, well, Avigayle, thanks for being with us. We will definitely continue the conversation, and wish you all the best. B'hatzlacha, good luck with everything, and hopefully we'll get through these challenging times soon. And it's
we'll all be better for it. Definitely.
Absolutely. Yep.
100%.
We're looking forward to it.